All right, if members would take their seat, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, I'd like to call to order our second meeting of this year, but my first one. I appreciate leadership for giving me this role here. So we'll get started. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Senator Berg. Senator Elkins. Senator Funky Fromar. Senator McDaniel. Senator Neal. Senator Nemus.
Present.
Senator Wilson. Representative Bojanowski.
Here.
Representative Camuel.
Here.
Representative Duval. Representative Fleming. Representative Johnson.
Here.
Representative Petrie.
Here.
Representative Tipton.
Here.
Auditor Ball.
Matt Fry's proxy.
John Hicks. Victor Maddox. Sharon Mattingly. Representative Hale.
Present.
Senator Higdon.
Here.
Representative Thomas.
Present. All right, if we would, we're going to stand and do the pledge real quick, and then I've asked Representative Johnson to lead us in prayer, so remain standing after the pledge.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Father, we come to you today thankful for all that you've given us. We thank you for this day, for the beautiful weather that we've had today. We thank you for all the many blessings you give us. Lord, as we come together to do your work, we ask that you'll guide our hearts and our minds. Allow us the wisdom that you would have us have so we can make the best decisions possible for the state of Kentucky. It's all this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. Members, if you look in your packet, you will see the minutes from January 27th. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion I heard over that way. Senator Elkins? Yep. Okay. You have a second? All right. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Are there any members have any comments or any guests out in the audience that they'd like to introduce or anything? All right. Well, if not, we will just move right into the agenda. Representative or Chairman Petrie, if you want, take the floor. We're discussion on House Bill 694. And I'm actually usually looking up at you more, so I'm sure you know about the green light issue and all that. So.
Thank you, co-chairs and members of the committee. We have House Bill 694 on for consideration, and essentially does the following. As the TRS Health Insurance Fund, Trust Fund, continues to approach a 100% funding level, this would establish a default position of, as that fund becomes 100% funded, then two components of the funding that goes in would switch over and go directly to TRS pension benefits. That would basically be the on behalf of that the state pays on behalf of employers, and then other employer contributions. If the pour over happens, hit 100%, which we anticipate currently, I think being 2027 is the date that's anticipated to happen, there would be approximately $154 million added into TRS annually relative to 24 numbers currently. It would also, that's essentially Section 1. Thereafter, this sets a default position. Boards may come back and make recommendations on what to do, but this would set the default in place.
That was quick. All right. It looks like hands are going up all over. So I think I saw Representative Bojanowski first.
Okay. So I'm a teacher. When I signed my contract, it was my understanding that I would pay X number of dollars and that I would then be vested in the pension and get that return. There was an agreement made in 2010 for the shared responsibility where teachers agreed to pay an additional 3% per year. 3.75% of my pay last year was $3,189. So just to understand what this would mean was that once we had met to the shared responsibility level on the health insurance, that I would be paying for unfunded liability that is the responsibility of the General Assembly, not you, not me. We weren't there when that decision was made, but we're shifting on to teachers this responsibility to pay off the unfunded liability. Is that correct?
Incorrect.
If I may,
Please go ahead.
could you explain why?
As I stated before, the only two payments that are being moved over would be the state payments on behalf of local districts and other employer contributions. Those are the only two things that will be shifted to the pension if there's 100% funding. The remainder remains as is.
Thank you.
All right. Senator Funky Fromeyer?
So a little bit of clarity on what is going into this now. Rep. Bojaneski was suggesting the portion of the employees, and then there's a portion of the districts, and then there's a portion of the state. Just looking for a little clarity on that.
Yeah, so again, you have state payments on behalf of local school districts. You've got state payments over and above statutory rate that we make. State payments relative to under 65 retirees, other employer contributions, and these are universities and other participating employers. And then you have the employee contribution. Out of all of these, what Section 1 sub 2 points to is that the on behalf of payments for local districts, health trust amount would be shifted over to the pension amount in the event of 100% funding of the health insurance trust fund, and the same would be true of other employer contributions. The health trust amount, once it reached 100%, it would be shifted over to or poured over into the TRS regular pension benefits. All of the other things remain as is.
All right. I have Representative Tipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have a couple of questions, if I may. Chair Petrie, I'm going to try and help the members understand what you just said.
Okay, thank you.
So I understand there are four main components that go into this health fund. The employee contribution, which is 3.75%. The school district contribution of 3%, which is an on behalf of payment from the state. Mm-hmm. The state contributes 0.75%, and then we have the amount of money that we annually or biannually in the budget appropriate for the under 65, which I think is around $70 million per year in that neighborhood.
Currently.
This bill just deals with the employer contribution of that 3% that the school districts pay. They receive on behalf in the 0.75%.
Correct.
Now my question goes to the employee contribution of 3.75%. As this is written, even at 100% funding, that 3.75% would continue to go into the health plan. Now, staff has told me, and I think we can verify with TRS, that normal cost is about 2%. Have you given any consideration to putting something in statute going forward when we get to this 100% to maybe lower the employee contribution? Is that something that we can discuss? Because like Representative Bojanowski said, if we can keep that 2% in there, at least even if we can reduce that at some point in time, and if it gets up to a certain level, maybe we could eliminate it altogether. Would you be open to having that conversation?
Open to any conversation like that. Again, from the very first statements regarding the bill, this sets a default position for when we hit 100% funding. That funding has to be maintained, and it doesn't prevent a board from, after reaching 100% funding, from making a recommendation about how to proceed. Or statutorily, a legislator wants to say this is how we need to reset the presumption. However, when we hit 27 and 100% funding, if we don't have something else recommended, we don't have another plan, this is the default position.
I understand. I have one more question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Several of our plans in KPPA, the health insurance is well over 100% funding. Is this approach something we could look at to divert payments from those health plans? We're not paying anything in those health plans since they're over 100%, correct? I just want some clarification on that.
I'm fine with looking at any other system to see if the same mechanism can be applied. Unfortunately, I can't get to everything all at once, so this is the one that's approaching in 27, the one that we can get a default position in.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll have conversations, I'm sure.
I'll be glad to. Thank you.
Representative Kemuel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Petrie, could you just give in the most broad way, or the simplest way, how is this a departure, or is this a departure from shared responsibility in 2010?
The shared responsibility dealt just with health, multiple components for funding sourcing, which was necessary at the time, horribly underfunded at the time. Now we're approaching 100%, and now I'm just looking for a default position for when we get there, which hopefully we will happen in 27. And if someone else comes up with a different way of doing it, then propose it and we can look at it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. May I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Chair Petrie, is there, and actually I think you probably answered this when you were responding to Representative Tipton, if there's a way to take additional burden off of the teachers who are paying in the extra percentage right now, is that something that we could look at in the future, just as a way to incentivize people to come teach?
Be glad to look at it, but inside Representative Tipton's question, make sure I bring this out. So not all amounts are being moved over. One, probably not best. Number two, we have to have money still going into the system to keep it operational. So we don't want to cut something that would make it start going backward in funding level. Just to let you, just so we've got an idea, in 18, the funding level of the health insurance was about 36%. 19, 46%, 20, 61%, 21, 60%, 22, 63.7%, 23, 71.3%. And then in 2024 numbers, it's at about 80.45%. One of the reasons I'm looking at a pour over as a default for the moment is this. Pension funding levels have not had that same type of trend. So over the same period of 18 through 24, you're looking at about 57.7% funded, 58.1% funded, 58.4, 57.2, 58.8, 58.6, 59.19. Not nearly the incline trend as the health. And even though there would be a pour over, you would be looking at about 154 million being poured over into the system, which we're up in the billions of contributions, but it would help out until an alternate plan could be arrived at.
Thank you.
Senator Berg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing up a subject that I'm just not that familiar with. When you talk about actuarially predicted 100% funding, can you explain exactly what that means?
Oh, I wish I could. I'm not an actuary, and they do a lot of magic with numbers and projections and estimates. But what we anticipate is that the trust fund will hit 100% funding of what it needs to outlay, and what it has coming in would result in a 100% funded trust fund. And they anticipate that being in 27. It could be 26. I would be extraordinarily happy. It could be 28, which could be more likely. And it's based on what actuarials do. I am not one, and I wish I could tell you further. If you've been listening to this committee for any amount of time, you'll understand it's like it all goes into a black box, and it makes a lot of sense when it comes out, but you're not sure you understand it all.
A follow-up question. Sorry. So does 100% funding guarantee that the program can cover 100% of the anticipated medical bills of the community?
I look at it more, and it's estimated to cover 100% of those, so that it's at 100%. If you'll note also in Section 1, sub 3, it talks about in the event we go from 100% funding, let's say that's hit in
And we go back
27,
down. I understand.
and then it goes down to 95 because sometimes things happen unexpectedly. Whatever it might be. In that event, then we would go back, no pour over, and the money would start going back into the health trust.
Can I follow up, sir?
Go ahead.
So you trust the actuarial analysis that what they say is 100% funding is actually adequate? You don't feel the need to bolster that by a 10 or 20% just to be absolutely certain?
No, I don't. And I won't say that it's 100% accuracy, but those are the projections and the type of mechanisms that this board, with every fund that we deal with, utilizes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Senator Higdon, Co-Chair Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Petrie, thank you for bringing this bill forward. It was one of these things that we know it has to be talked about because that day's coming, thank God, that this is fully funded. And looking around, I'm the only legislator here that voted for this bill. And that was in 2010, and I remember the conversations very well. And so back to the percentage that the educators were put in, that they did 2%, and it was phased in a 0.5% a year over 4 years, and worked out very well. And so hopefully we'll see that we, when we unravel this, that we will, the educators will get some of their 3 3/4% back. I think that was always the anticipation that would happen, but not. And you could talk to 100 people that were here at that time. You'll get 100 different answers of how they thought shared responsibility would wind down. So again, thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you for starting this conversation, and we will have a lot of conversation, and we can talk that same 100 people that I was talking about, and they'll have you 100 different ways to unwind it. So again, thank you for bringing this forward.
Very good, thank you. And one of the reasons we went with just a straight 100% 95 and didn't deal with the funding mechanisms and percentages is back to Senator Berg's question. Actuarials are set now. Once you start tinkering with and modifying those percentages, you're going to throw all projections off.
Alrighty. Any members have any more questions or anything? Or everyone's good? Chairman Petrie is very accessible. He always seems to answer calls or will call you back. So if you think of him later on, or if you have constituents, I think I'm not speaking out of line there, that you are available to try to answer any questions there. So thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Alrighty. We're going to move on to Senate Bill 183. Senator Matt Nunn, if you want to come on down, introduce yourself for the record, even though we just kind of did, but you know about the green buttons too.
Yeah, I am not Siri, although I am pleased to meet you all. Thank you, co-chairs, co-chairman, and members of the committee. I am Senator Matt Nunn, representing District 17, and I do have a guest here with me today.
Chris Nolan, representing the APCIA, the American Property Casualty Insurance Association.
I'll explain this bill in two parts. First of all, what it does, and number two, why it's necessary. What it does, it does two things. Number one, it updates 4 different sections of KRS, beginning at pages 1, 5, 12, and 18 of the bill. It does the same exact thing in all 4 sections. It defines a shareholder-sponsored proposal and an economic analysis, and it establishes that when a shareholder-sponsored proposal is presented for a vote by a company's shareholders, a proxy advisor voting on behalf of the retirement system must act solely in the interest of the retirement system's members and beneficiaries. Here's why that's important and necessary. Proxy advisors hired by retirement systems have shown a penchant for supporting environmental, social, and governance agendas, also known as ESG in the common vernacular. They've done so by voting or recommending a vote for shareholder-sponsored proposals contrary to the advice of a company's board of directors. ESG-related proposals accounted for 61% of all proposals in 2022, according to a U.S. House of Representatives memorandum. These large blocks of votes can lead to the adoption of measures that promote left-leaning goals to solve complex societal and global issues to the detriment of shareholders, our current and future state retirees. The two largest proxy advisor firms are ISS and Glass Lewis. Together, they command 97% of the market, and I learned that at least one of our state's funds uses ISS as a proxy advisor. The U.S. proxy voting guidelines of ISS are terribly broad and would allow for recommendations that are political or social in nature and contrary to the interest of shareholders. It is well documented that ISS regularly recommends or votes in favor of shareholder proposals that are not in the economic interest of shareholders. ISS is not subject to meaningful regulation and is a foreign entity. That's a key point that we'll talk about later. Their influence over the voting shares cannot be overstated and is evident by the number of shares that vote in line with ISS recommendations within 48 to 72 hours of the ISS report being issued, and the stark differences in the levels of shareholder support received by proposals that are supported by the proxy advisor versus those that are not supported by a proxy advisor. These legislative measures will remove the free option proxy advisors currently have to recommend or vote on shareholder proposals that are not in the best interest of our current and future state retirees. I do want to mention one thing. There is a committee sub that I want to introduce that more narrowly defines proxy advisors. And I mentioned just a second ago a key point about proxy advisors not having any type of oversight or accountability. And that's why the committee sub would be necessary to narrowly define what a proxy advisor is, to bifurcate them from other advisors that do have a defined fiduciary responsibility and oversight. And I'll let Chris explain that distinction, if it's okay.
Repeat your question again.
I was talking about the committee sub that would narrowly define a proxy advisor and why that is necessary and appropriate.
Sure, and I want to be clear that it's an amendment that we've been working on, not yet been shared with the chairman of this committee or the committee of jurisdiction for the bill. But we want to make sure and differentiate between proxy advisor firms, what their activity is in relationship to investment managers or investment advisors that are under higher standards and scrutiny under SEC and their laws that proxy advisors, especially ISS and Glass Lewis, are not subject to. So we want to be clear and define that it's not aimed at the investment managers that are involved in a lot of this activity.
And I guess I will close my statements and be obviously open to comments, but I do want to point out, and I think you have this information in your packet. It's a Q&A, and it explains the issue far better than I could. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, members. We do have a couple of questions. Senator Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you explain, sir, because I really don't know, the difference between a proxy advisor and any other type of financial advisor?
That's essentially what Chris was explaining. I'll let you try that again.
The proxy advisors are holding the votes that somebody may have. So if I have stock in a company, a certain amount of stock for a certain period of time, I can vote on proposals or even put forth proposals to a company. And the proxy advisors are managers that manage, for instance, the pension funds have so many votes because they own so many shares because the investment is so large that somebody else manages those votes for them because, of course, the pension funds are busy making sure the pensions are operating correctly for our state employees and not worried about what votes are going before the board of Chevron or the board of an insurance company or something like that. So these folks are the ones who are recommending how that block of votes is to be voted on. And most of the time, they're voting against the board of directors of a publicly traded company's recommendations. The evidence is that many of the large proxy advisors are doing that, yes.
And it's important to note that independent board of directors have a fiduciary responsibility to that company and its shareholders, whereas proxy advisors do not.
Centerberg, turn your mic back on there. There you go.
May I ask another question, sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we use proxy advisors in Kentucky?
We do, there's two large players in the market that command 97%. That's Glass Lewis and ISS. We know of at least one pension plan that is using ISS.
Follow-up question, sir?
Go ahead.
Do we know how much we have invested in this ISS? How much we're letting them control of our state's money?
I'm embarrassed to say it's a question that I didn't ask, so I don't know.
And they're an advisory firm, so I believe all of our pension monies are invested in order to make to earn returns for our state employees while that money just sits there.
Of course.
So there are layers, as I understand it, of managers that help manage all that money. And then our focus here today is just on the proxy advisors that happened when shareholder proposals are voted on.
Alrighty. I'm sure they'll be available for questions too if you have some. Representative Tipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Nunn, I appreciate you bringing this. This is a conversation we've had before PPOB, and I appreciate one comment you brought up. You brought up fiduciary responsibility, and I think that is so essential for us to understand that the money that's invested in our retirement systems, there should be a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that our state employees in all the systems are getting the maximum return possible. We dealt with this in 2023. We had legislation. Could you share a little bit about what this legislation adds or how it strengthens the law that was passed in 2023?
Chris, why don't you answer that question?
Sure. And the law in 2023 was it was a large piece of legislation, a very good piece of legislation that set up the framework. And what this bill does is simply amend that legislation to go one step further in one particular area, because the 2023 law said that the pension board shall not adopt the recommendations of proxy advisors and shall not allow the proxy advisors to vote on behalf of the system unless they acknowledge in writing and accept that they commit to follow the board's adopted proxy voting guidelines, which is a complex way to say. The pensions tell the proxy advisors what their guidelines are and that they should be voting in the fiduciary responsibility of the board. And so they tell them that, and they sign a contract to do that. But they're not, it's kind of like a promise. They're promising to vote that way, but the proxy advisors are not voting that way. And so this bill goes one step further and says, okay, if you vote against the board's guidelines, in this case a publicly traded board's guidelines, then show us the economic analysis that you used that voting for a proposal that's against the board's recommendations is in the best interest of that company, not of the pension system, but of the company that the pension system is invested in. Because the pension system needs the highest rate of return in its investment in that company.
Okay on that? Okay. Representative Bojanowski.
Okay, let me see if I asked this correctly. So a little bit out of my purview. Would anything in this bill, or maybe even in 2023, if you know, prevent pension funds from investing in companies with higher environmental, social, or governance factors if that investment is predicted to have a higher return?
I'm not familiar with the 2023 bill, but this would not prevent that. It merely places the responsibility on those proxy advisors to not make recommendations for votes in that way.
I believe that is correct, and I believe the 2023 legislation just talks about the fiduciary and pecuniary, if I say that word right, responsibility of investing pension funds. And if there is an ESG proposal that makes money and a publicly traded company is making money through various environmental, social or governance issues, and the pension system wanted to invest in those, I'm sure they could, as long as it had a fiduciary responsibility for a return on investment.
All right. Representative Camuel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question, I hope. Have you brought this piece of legislation forth because there are issues with our investments of some of the pension systems not performing as expected due to votes by some of these groups?
I haven't reviewed any particular pension systems or results. I think this is more of a proactive measure to make sure that any future shareholder votes that are related to anything our pensions hold, to prevent votes that aren't in the best interest of our shareholders.
May I ask another question?
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So just trying to make it clear. So we're trying to solve a problem that has not occurred yet that you know of?
I'm not sure that I would make that statement. Just as I can't say that it has occurred, I can't say that it hasn't occurred. What it certainly does is ensure it doesn't occur in the future.
Sorry, one more question.
If I may add to that.
Yeah.
We have evidence through numerous studies, both by the U.S. financial, the work group created by the Financial Services Committee in Congress, that has identified dozens, if not hundreds, of examples where these proposals have been put forth and they've not been proven to be in the economic best interest of a publicly traded company. And those companies spend millions of dollars defending themselves against those proposals. And so it's happening out there, and it's no doubt happened with our pension system. But we have not targeted the pension system and said, please show us this, because we don't want to cause a lot of expense on our pension system. So we know it's occurring, and it's occurring out there in pretty significant quantities. So the best way to try to tackle this issue is to bring light to it. And one way to do that is this group right here of legislators has the ability to set the policy for our pension systems and making it clear and shining a light to say this is happening, there's evidence that it's happening, and it shouldn't happen with our public state dollars for our pensioners.
And I found the specific point that you're referencing, and this is a memorandum from the House Committee on Financial Services dated June 23rd, 2023. It states that last year, meaning 2022, ESG shareholders' proposals accounted for 61% of all proposals on proxy ballots, nearly double the previous year's counts. It goes on to say that research demonstrates a correlation between increased activism by public pension funds promoting social agendas and lower stock returns, resulting in a 14% decrease in valuation for affected companies.
So may I follow up with one more?
Okay.
Thanks.
One more.
Just to make sure that I understand, so you're saying that their proxy votes caused a 14% decrease in the value of the companies, but not the value of our pensions. Is that correct?
The valuation of the company ultimately affects the valuation of our pensions, and so depending on what size of that company has in our pension, then yes. But if it's a 1% impact on our pensions, that's 1% too far.
All right, thank you.
Who's next? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I may have missed this in the language, but is there any, should one of the agencies find that they have actually invested in such a way that we haven't gotten our maximum benefits? Is there any language either in this bill or in current statute that you know of that would hold them accountable in any way? Are there any penalties that they would have to deal with?
Representative, no, I'm not aware of anything. This is, again, a going forward basis.
I think maybe we need to go just a little farther. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Senator Nemes.
Thank y'all for this bill, and I think it's hard to understand what's really going on, and that the 97% controlled by two companies, proxy companies, are foreign entities, and they are making suggestions are what's going to be voted on by these companies that many times has nothing to do with profits or losses. And what we're doing is just a shot across the bow saying that we're looking at them. This is really very small to what we need to be doing, because they're doing a lot of things with our votes that have nothing to do with returns. And we want them to only vote on returns. How does this affect the good outcome and a good return of that business that we have invested in? All the other minutia, they need to explain why they're coming forward with that. Is that kind of succinct?
I think, Senator, I think you said it better than we did.
Much.
Thank you.
All right. Any other members have any questions? If not, Senator Nunn, thank y'all for being here. We appreciate it. I don't know if everyone has your number yet to reach out to you, but I'm sure there's a few here that probably do. So if they have any more questions on that. So thank you for being here. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. Co-Chair Higdon. Look, he already knows the routine. He's hidden down. Yeah, kind of like you've done this a little bit. Senator, introduce yourself just in case for the record. And
Senator Jimmy Higdon, 14th Senate District, and talk about something that I'll add to one of my bills that I want to make sure that it's out in the public. It's very simple. What I'd like to see is expand the membership on PPOB to get some younger members. It's some other members. So this pension thing is hard to understand, and it's like drinking from a fire hose. So it just give us a few more seats. And right now the chairman of A&R, the House and the Senate both serve on the committee, and but that would make them a permanent. This would make them a permanent member, where they wouldn't count toward our other 8 members. And same way with the committee chair of state government in the House, and state and local in the Senate. They would be permanent members. And so what it would do, we currently we have 8 and 8 in the House, 8 in the Senate, and this would really raise the number to 10 and 10. And I'd like to add the state treasurer. Currently, they're not on there. We have the auditor and the AG, but we do not have the state treasurer. So I'd like to add that, and also allow. There's a moratorium against anyone serving on the board. And we have some appointees. The governor has 2 appointees, and they're supposed to have some. He hasn't appointed anybody for years. That those spots are vacant. And we have 2 other spots, one appointed by the President of the Senate and the other one by the Speaker of the House. And those are supposed to have some pension experience also. But there's a moratorium in the current bill, the way the legislation is written, that no one who participates in any of the retirement systems could serve on the board. And I just think that's probably, I know I serve on the Legislative Judicial Oversight Board, and I do participate in that plan. So I don't see a reason why PPOB would say that a former legislator or someone who worked with CERS or KERS or TRS couldn't serve on the board. So I'd like to make those changes, and like I said, I wanted to bring them before you all today, and kind of run up the flagpole and see if you would agree to that. But like I said, we do need members. We need people that understand the pension system. Had we done this 30 years ago, we probably wouldn't have the issues that we have today, because simply when all the time until PPOB was started, there were 2 people in the House of Representatives, Mike Cherry and Yance, Representative Yance. They were the pension gurus. Everything went through them, and really nobody else understood pensions but those 2. And so now we're more diverse. We have a lot of people that understand pensions, but like to get some more exposed to it, especially younger members. That's it. Take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, there are at least one question.
Okay.
Representative Bojanowski.
All right, thank you. So I just want to make sure I understood what you said. I am a teacher and I'm in TRS. Are you saying that I would continue to be allowed to be on PPOB?
I'm talking the appointees, the governor's appointees. He has two.
I see.
The
Okay,
Senate president has one, and the speaker has one.
right.
Any of those four members currently could not be someone who has participated in any of the retirement systems. Most likely a retired person, or it could be an active member too. I don't see well, I guess the Senate president could appoint another legislator if that was his choice. But anyway, it's thinking about somebody outside of the General Assembly. Maybe a former legislator, like I said, maybe a retired teacher, but the way it's currently written would not allow you when you retire to serve on this board. And you would make a good member, so it shouldn't be that way.
All righty. Do we have any more questions, comments for Co-Chair Higdon? I believe that's it. You did a good job explaining.
Well,
Go
thank
ahead.
you. And just to back you up, I want to remind what we're doing here today. Any bill that it involves the retirement systems must be vetted in PPOB before we'll hear it on the House or the Senate floor. And Senate leadership and House leadership has bought in on that with us, and so that's what we're doing today, is making sure that every bill that involves pensions goes through the entire process, and it starts here, and we get to vet it here. So thank you all, and thank you for your work.
We used to have schickelized. I guess we could say it's Higginized now. Or
No, it's schickelized. It says it falls off the tongue much better.
All righty. Members, kind of stay tuned on the March meeting. That kind of, if we were to meet, it kind of falls kind of when we're not up here during the veto period. So we will only if we have to, I think. So I'll let Co-Chair Higdon kind of make that decision. If there's no other business in front of us, we stand adjourned.